Hello, everyone watching live and on demand, and welcome to WiCX Talk Trends, how AI and tech are redefining customer experience. I'm so thrilled that so many of you have decided to join us today, which is hosted by Women in CX in collaboration with Zendesk, a leading provider of customer service solutions. So we're here to discuss the findings of Zendesk's latest trends report, looking at how AI and tech are changing the industry that we all work in. But you haven't seen the report yet, don't worry, because we'll be sending a copy straight to your inbox after the panel. So I'll be your moderator for today. And for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Clare Muscutt, the founder and CEO of Women in CX, the world's first community for women working in customer experience and technology. And we exist simply to unleash the power of women to lead the movement for human-centered business through content, community, education, and events just like these. So it's so awesome to see everyone starting to tune in. So please, if you would like to let us know in the chat where you're joining us from today. And as we'd love you to get involved and participate in this discussion today, please let us know the answer to the first question that we're also going to be asking our panelists, which is a very divisive one. Will AI augment or replace human agents? And I'm looking forward to seeing those answers coming in. But just so you know exactly what's going to happen today, we're going to be having a 40-minute panel followed by Q&A. So please do all feel free to keep your comments coming as we go. And if you've got any big questions, just pop those in the chat, and our team working in the background will be able to collect them all up and ask them. We'll collect them ready to ask the panelists at the end. So before I introduce our esteemed panelists for today, let me help you by setting the scene for today's discussion by sharing some headlines from the CX Trends 2024 report. And firstly, that is that 59% of consumers believe that generative AI will completely change the way that they interact with companies in the next 2 years. And for those who've already experienced the technology firsthand, that number actually jumps to 75%, which is huge. But with how Gen AI has so far unsuccessfully been adopted by many companies, the big question remains, how can we avoid the same pitfalls and really harness the potential of this technology to enhance what's most important, being the human experience? So a big theme in the report, one personally I really worry about, is the danger of bias and discrimination in AI algorithms and decision making, with 63% of consumers reporting that they've got concerns about it too. And we've seen so many stories hitting the headlines already. I think the question for us today is, how exactly can we mitigate bias and discrimination risks when we're implementing Gen AI too? And unsurprisingly, a huge one is data privacy and secure experience, which is super high on everybody's agenda. And I was actually personally really shocked to read that 56% of CX leaders reported that their organization has actually suffered a data breach or cyber attack targeting their customer data in the last year alone. As I said, like super shocking. So that leaves us with a question that, given how now we need so much personal information to leverage the power of personalization, how precisely can businesses balance the need to provide instant personalized experiences with protecting the customer and their data? And finally, the report also explored this thing called next-gen experiences, stating that although only 33% of businesses have already implemented what's called conversational commerce, 56% plan to explore it and make it available to customers this year. And I don't know about you, but this one's pretty new to me as well. So I think the question we're going to be answering today is, what exactly is conversational commerce? How does it change the customer journey? And with that knowledge, how are we going to capitalize on that trend? So I'm just going to see what the people are saying in the chat so far. Oh, there's tons of you. So we've got lots of lovely good mornings. So Shamim says augment 100%. Lara saying, if correct, augment. Sarah saying we always need the human touch. So yeah, sounds like everybody is thinking augment. We haven't got any replace. Oh, Claire White actually is commenting to say that some roles will be replaced. However, employees should be retained and their roles updated to support. Lovely. Hi, Nicola. We've got Christine. Oh, wonderful to see you all. Thanks so much for tuning in. So without further ado, we've got so much to cover. It's a massive topic, isn't it? But we've assembled the perfect panel for this task. So I'm super, super excited to introduce you to today's speakers. We've got Sandra Thompson from EI Evolution, Natasha Dekker from Santander, Emily Freeland from Zendesk, and Agnes So from HotDoc. Welcome, ladies.
Hello, hello.
Hi. It's super to have you with us today. And I'm going to let you, because you're so amazing, introduce yourself. So if Sandra, you'd like to kick us off and tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and that all-important question, do you think AI is going to augment or replace human agents?
So I'm going to start with augment, but not as we know it. I think that there will be some fundamental changes, so we won't be recognizable in some cases. First point. I'm an emotional intelligence coach, so I attempt to understand what's going on in the brain, psychology, neuroscience, and I bring that to my customer experience and my employee experience consultancy. So I'm here, everyone, to represent the brain. Thank you for having me.
Representing the brain. I love that. And Natasha, you're next. Who are you representing?
Gosh,
women in banking, maybe.
Well, as always, lovely to be here. Morning, everyone. So my name's Natasha. I'm a lead UX researcher at Santander. So I guess I'll be looking at this very much through a lens of better experiences for users, but done in a way that's accessible and usable, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I'm always gonna go down on the side of augment, because you know what, like my therapist always says, humans need humans.
We do, absolutely. Love that. So two so far for augment. And Agnes.
Hello from the future here in Australia. I'm Agnes, the head of customer experience at HotDoc. We are essentially a patient engagement platform, again, based here in Australia. And I think today my input is really going to be more from a B2B and a B2B2C perspective, where I think our direct customers, they're healthcare providers, but their customers are patients. So obviously healthcare is a pretty heavily regulated area, specifically here in Australia. So hopefully I can bring a bit of my own personal perspective working in CX and health tech, but also a little bit of our customers' perspective here today. And my answer is definitely augment. But I think it is dependent on industry, which I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about today.
Awesome. I can't wait to get more into that. And last but definitely not least, the lovely Emily.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I work at Zendesk and I look after value consulting, which essentially is understanding the human and business impact of what our tool can do and how we can create meaningful CX experiences and EX experiences with that. For me, it's 3 parts. It will augment to the point of reducing, but also generating new roles. It's impossible that there won't be new roles generated with the advent and the expansion of AI, which people will stop doing the same types of roles. So we can say that's reducing, but ultimately, I think there's whole new opportunities coming out of this, which are really exciting.
Love that. And we're definitely going to get more into detail during this conversation. So to kick us off with a little scene setter, then we're going to start with AI and intelligent experiences. And I think it's safe to say that there's just been so much buzz around AI generally. Everybody's talking about it and many are concerned about the future. And although AI and machine learning have been around for quite a while now, I think the introduction of ChatGPT in November 22 being such a public thing made technologies more accessible to everybody and got the mainstream super excited about it, because normally these technology innovations tend to happen a little bit behind closed doors and we don't really know them to the extent that we've experienced Gen AI ourselves. So we've seen loads of useful applications and supporting agents with processes like summarization and responses. I love those ones. But I think we're yet to see the potential of AI really changing the game at the front end with customer interaction. You may disagree, but I'd love to hear some examples from your own experiences where AI has actually enhanced customer interactions and outcomes, because as we said, those examples are rarer than the bad chatbots going rogue. So Emily, I know you've got some great examples. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Sure. So we're all aware of how tech can really support us in our customer service crew. So meaningful, timely, as and when we want it being served, how we want. That's how it should be. And we do see it happening a lot in businesses we work with. One place I'm really interested in AI supporting us is more empowering people. So sort of more the altruistic side of how tech can support. And a lady called Rihanna Spring founded Spring ACT, which is a non-profit organization to help abuse victims and survivors, I should say, because that's sort of the more important part, right? And she's created the world's first chatbot assisting those survivors of domestic violence to be able to chat asynchronously, incognito essentially, where their data isn't stored, where they're not speaking with a real live human, but where they can receive that support, guidance, and help in a way that ideally has no negative repercussion and is where and when they need it with security, and also removes some of that potential shame around it. So you're looking for help. You're not speaking to someone that may be judging. Ideally, you're speaking to a bot that won't judge. I'm not saying bots won't get there. So those are some of the really humane implementations and use cases of AI that we've seen.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? That actually maybe considering you don't always want to talk to a human about some of those things. So Agnes, I think like healthcare, maybe there's a patient care, there's maybe a link there.
Yeah, potentially. I think I can really only speak from my experiences, again, that I work in a very risk-adverse industry, and it's for good reason. You know, we're not an e-commerce space. For example, healthcare is just not, I think, a space right now where you want to launch Gen AI into, due to the level at which you could really just mess up a patient journey or give completely wrong advice. I think Deb in the chat already mentioned that that's absolutely a risk. So I think for us, there's just so much more at stake. And at least for my journey as a CX leader in that space, it has to be much more considered. So I agree with you, Claire, that we are still firmly in the use Gen AI tools just to enable our people more. And we believe that if you do that right, we can get good customer interactions and outcomes, because you're supporting the internal customer, your employees, for example, to better service your external ones. And the way I think that we've approached this over the last 12 months to get good results is to firstly just start with education. And I think that even the Zendesk Trends report talks about how half of the employees that they surveyed for the report said that they were yet to actually receive adequate training. So I think starting with training your employees was really important for us for a number of reasons. Firstly, if you cast your mind back to 9 months ago, there was still legitimate concern that AI was coming to take everyone's jobs. So of course, we know it's probably not that simple right now, but by getting everyone sort of into the tools, they realized soon the limitations of what it could accomplish as much as they saw the potential. So they weren't fearful anymore. And then secondly, we were actually able to leverage those who saw the greater potential, and they became the people who actually championed the different tools that we use now. So I think for us, yeah, it's very much still based around the employee and the employee experience.
Love that. And I think we talked about one of the pitfalls there, and definitely there's a lot of chat happening now with lots of comments agreeing. And I think Annie's point was really interesting to say that talking to vulnerable individuals actually was a case that she hadn't really considered. But let's go a bit further into these pitfalls and how we need to avoid them. So what are the most common mistakes we see when businesses adopt generative AI? And Natasha, you fancy taking that one? We'd love to hear your advice on how we can avoid them.
So I think, and I think we are moving beyond this, and there are certain organizations that are kind of adapting this, so KPMG, Clifford Chance, and lots of others, that General Electric is another one. And I think the thing that they all have in common is that they've really thought through kind of like 7 key areas that you need to think about as a business when you're implementing AI, whether if it's for your employees or enhancing your customer experience. So that's around the ethics of how you're using and implementing the AI, the impact that AI is going to have, the rights of people when you're actually kind of using that AI in a customer context, privacy, going to Claire's point from earlier, trust. Like, how do you develop that trust in an AI tool? Because a lot of people still want to, for instance, in my industry, people still want to deal with a human being when something is very private and very serious. And that leads into the final thing around transparency. And those are the things you need to consider. It's fine. Those are very big in kind of really big intangible concepts. So how does that translate? So it's things like, have you done a risk assessment of that AI tool? Have you actually thought about kind of, so a lot of large companies now, they have a commitment to net zero. They have that, please remind me what that section is called in your statement, but they have a statement, and you obviously have to
Sustainability.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. But actually, there's a lot of information now that says that AI actually having those data centers actually is actually more of a drain on energy and resource. So actually, that's going to impact your net zero assessment, right? And then so you got your risk logs. You've got what are your success metrics? Like, what problem is that AI trying to solve, and how are you going to measure that? How are you measuring your trends? How are you measuring the data that you find? And then to the point that Deb, you just put into the chat, 100% on your data. Like, this is the final thing. Is your data clean enough for that AI tool to work effectively? Because essentially, a really good example is from General Electric, where they completely revamped their internal employee system for HR, multiple channels, and they use the AI, to our point, to augment how they were looking at that data. And actually, they use humans to do the qualitative analysis, so UX researchers to do the qualitative assessment to enhance how well that AI tool was able to work and pull out the trends for employee concerns. And then, in a circular sense, use the AI tool to assess the language and use that language to create content that was in the language that employees were using to ask those questions. So, and then they were able to attach the metrics to that. So I think I've kind of covered the pitfalls, but also how you would go through them. It's not a once and done, TLDR.
Love a TLDR. So kind of like in summary, there are some kind of strategic and big topic questions and assessment that you'd need to make, but also the importance of like involving the human factors in the design of these things, testing, learning, iterating, getting feedback, being able to ensure that what you're building actually meets human needs rather than just relieves the process, right?
Can I just say, like, I looked at a few tools. I think we can safely say that none of these tools have gone through a design and research process from a UX perspective, because they're not usable, they're not friendly, they're not designed in a way where I'm thinking, oh, this is fun, So just putting that out there.
Huge opportunity for that intersection of customer experience, user experience, design, and being able to make these things actually augment human experiences. I totally agree. Now, representing the brain, Sandra, have you got any thoughts around
so
and how to avoid them?
So I'm not sure if this is going to be popular, and it might be a bit boring, but here we go. So
love an unpopular opinion.
Thank you. So what is the purpose of AI? What is it? What's it here to do? Well, it's here to automate and augment and understand and create autonomy. Why are organizations not saying to themselves, right, this is what it's capable of doing. Here are the clusters of what our customers are, what they stand for, what their attitudes are, what their needs are, how their brains work. So different levels of uncertainty, different levels of risk, different levels of needing human contact. So here's what AI does. Here's what the brains of our customers need. Here are where the problems are. Why don't we get some sort of triangulation, and why don't we be more specific about what the role is, rather than going off and saying, shiny new tool, let's get it, everyone, and then apply it everywhere, wind up a load of people, upset a load of people, make a few people happy, and most importantly, that I also read from the report, and you've already highlighted, is create further disparity between the front line and senior leaders, because what senior leaders are bringing in versus what frontline people think they need and how they're going to use it, there's a gulf. Let's fix that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like, I've been talking on stages all over the world in the last year about like bad digital experiences where they've digitized the bad processes rather than going back to, well, what is the use case? What are the priority journeys that we should be focusing on? Where is the right point for us to implement AI and automation to do something that is possible, acceptable, and actually probably better to be done that way, rather than, as you said, that kind of scattergun of, oh, here's something that we could use Gen AI for, let's switch off a channel and do it that way. But that's definitely the wrong way to do it. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
All I want to say is, we know that humans want different degrees of control, different degrees of choice, different degrees of managing loss aversion. Why don't we look at their brains and figure out what would be right for them? Because AI might not be right for a whole cluster of people. Don't push it on them. Sorry, just had to add that, Claire. I'm finished now.
No, it's fine. And Deb Clawless is agreeing as well there, saying like that there's that, you know, clear, let's look for a cost saving, which isn't partnered with let's look at the right opportunity that's going to benefit the humans in this, that also will give us that cost saving. So for me, it's not one or the other. I think it's both, and being able to hold both of those things in mind at the same time. So I think we've already had a little indication of this from Christine Hemphill talking about testing for risk and bias. So I think that brings us nicely into the next topic for us to discuss. So to set the scene around DEI, bias, and AI, that's a lot of acronyms. There are like so many examples of bias in algorithms already that are hitting the headlines. For example, predictive AI algorithms being skewed due to underrepresentation of data from women and minority groups, which is impacting things like accuracy in diagnoses in the healthcare space. But also with generative AI, we're now seeing things like AI visual creations, if anyone's used ChatGPT for those, that massively stereotype women and minority groups as well. So we see Gen AI, you know, if we ask them a question about, you know, doctors or firefighters, typically you'd see the strong, buff, white guy, and women doing more, so it's like menial roles like cleaning, which is just like unacceptable. But it's further perpetuating the marginalization of women and minorities. And like, there's no getting away from this, is there? Like, when technology like Twitter, when it's looking at facial recognition, it's only like focusing on white faces. Like, this is a serious problem. So I think, you know, this is what I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on particularly. So Natasha, could you share a little bit more about what you think the potential risks of biases in AI algorithms are, particularly given the conversation we're having in relation to customer service and support systems?
Okay, so I think there's two sides of this. So on the kind of internal side, the question I'd be asking is like, what and how are we, I hate this word, how are we profiling our customers in the most compassionate way to inform those data points? Like, I think controversially, I'm not a big fan of personas. I absolutely loathe them. I know there are marketing and I know a lot of user researchers love them. I particularly don't, because I think they pigeonhole people, and I think AI has, to your point, has the risk of doing the same. And if we look at, I think biometrics is the best example, because they are created primarily by white people with white people in mind. And there was a landmark case just last week from Uber Eats delivery driver. And it's the first case that's gone through, and actually he's going to receive compensation. But essentially, because Uber Eats installed a biometric system where you use that to log in to be able to get work, because of the way that system was set up, his skin color wasn't registered on that system, which meant that he couldn't log in to get work because it was a discriminatory login process, and he missed out on lots of money, and he took that case to court. And that literally happened last week. Like, that ruling went through last week. And my point with that is that we're not there yet. All the teams, like the board over at ChatGPT, Sam Altman, all of them, all the women at Google AI that were let go who were women of color, we're not part of that process. And when we're not part of that process, you are going to get people like this defendant who do slip through the cracks. And I find, even for me personally, I struggle to use biometrics. I love it, but I have to make sure that I'm so well lit. It's not a coincidence that my wardrobes are white as my background, okay, for the contrast. And these are things that I have to think about that a lot of white people don't have to think about. And I don't think there are enough people in organizations thinking it through to that level of detail.
Yeah, like, awesome but awful examples there, Natasha. Thank you so much for sharing, and also bringing in your lived experience to that one. So are the ways, obviously the powerful point there is like, have diverse teams and leadership who are building these products and services. Like, that's the main point. But are there any other ways that we can mitigate these biases and the risks of further compounding this problem that already exists. And Emily, as the tech expert, would you like to share any?
Might be overselling my skills a little bit. Really, really pushing on what Natasha said. Like, you need diverse people building these tools. People are behind the tech. It doesn't happen without us. Will it happen one day without people? Who knows? It shouldn't, right? We need oversight of diverse, varied people to give diverse, varied opinions, content, actions, activities, so we maintain that human element, so we keep serving humans. That's what it's for, right? But on top of that, we really need to have that transparency, which you've all talked about. So making sure we're transparent about who we're trying to serve and what we're trying to do. And to the personas point, yeah, I think having a picture of me representing everyone, I don't represent everyone, right? But it is the type of image you get in the environment today. I think we've got to understand the people we're serving. And like we say, we need these huge data sets to be able to get that. And another key point is chatbots learn from what has already happened. They can't predict an ideal state. What has already happened is far from ideal. There are wonderful things in the world that it can learn from. And if only we could do that. But however, that's a point of view as well. That lacks objectivity. So making sure we're addressing that data, that core information and insights that we're using as source information to serve our human beings, making sure that it is not damaging. So ensuring we remove things like race, specific location, school you've attended, for example. One example is where credit checks have gone horribly wrong for people that are of certain ethnicities, certain schools and certain geolocations. Is that really necessary in your data set to provide service to people? Or is that a conditioning of prejudice that we've already got in there? So again, keeping that human element, we need diverse human beings running, building and monitoring this stuff constantly. And maybe those are some of the new jobs that we've not thought about today. AI chatbots might take away certain service jobs, but it might create more empathetic, sort of heart people focused jobs that are perhaps not there today.
Powerful stuff. And yes, Sandra, what's the brain's perspective on this? How can we avoid some of these mistakes? And now Natasha's trashed personas.
Thank you. Well, I mean, good, because actually the persona is so limiting in the messy, complicated, incredible brains that we have. I've always thought that it should be values-based because they very often don't move. Anyway, more on that in a minute. The point here is that as humans, we are socialized, we are a result of the experiences that we've had and the context in the moment. We can only deal with certain things in our conscious mind. There's a shed load of stuff going in on our unconscious mind. So I think there's a perfect time for us now to say, we are full of fault. We are messy. We are complicated. It's like spaghetti in our brains. Let's acknowledge the fact that we have got biases. Let's acknowledge that. Let's not punish people for it, but accept that the brain is a bit of a mess. We're beautiful and we're incredible, but it is a bit of a mess because we have to simplify stuff in order to live our lives. And it gets messy and not very nice when we make judgments that are not of service to wider society. So number one, let's say we do live with bias. Number two, let's recognize those things that are not in service. Let's create this amazing accountability to one another. Let's create proper governance that is representative of all of the different neurodiversity, the way we make decisions differently, our color, creed, sexuality, whatever it is. Let's have that represented on a panel, of people, so the governance is right. Let's sort out our data sampling. Let's have big arguments about what that data contains, and let's fight for those that are underrepresented in society. Let's label the data correctly, and let's make sure that the people who are being trained have the psychological safety to say, this is not good enough. I am not willing to work with this stuff, because actually what you're doing is you're doing X, Y, and Z. There are movements out there. I know that you know this. There's a brilliant talk, to build on Natasha's point, brilliant talk of the Algorithmic Justice League. It's a TED talk. So it's big, but isn't this an incredible time to live where we can correct our path for the future? Because this stuff is highlighting these issues. We've got a moment now to course correct. Isn't that incredible?
It certainly is an opportunity, and I've written that one down, the Algorithmic Justice League TED Talk, to explore that in finer detail. And I can see from the chat that there's definitely nuances in this. Like, it's not just about removing data, because if you remove data, you might not understand the impact on people positively from a diversity point of view. And I think Christine very much represents the disability perspective in the comments that she's made there. So yeah, it isn't kind of black and white, to excuse the phrase. There's lots of nuance and areas of grey to further investigate. But I think the big message here definitely is this chance to shape the future. And it's kind of, to Sandra's point, the intention where we start with this stuff, isn't it? And with Natasha already talking about, this kind of checklist of things from an ethical point of view, is that has to be like a design principle, doesn't it? Like designing for inclusion, not perpetuating AI and bias. But also that troubling question of AI is built on the past, and there is the truth there, the reality that the past is biased. There is a lot of information. If you just look at ChatGPT, everything that's previously, to 2021, wasn't it? And the bots that are appearing on Twitter that are actually making political statements because they think it's what people want to hear. Like, I think for me, it's that data question. How do we actually decorrupt what is already a corrupted data set in order to create that better future? And obviously that's a bigger question, but maybe one that we should pose to the big guns like Google to figure out. So moving us on, because we're already halfway through this awesome session, is to start to talk about our third topic out of 4, and that's data and trustworthy experiences. And as I said at the start, and how we've highlighted both in the chat and in our conversation so far, that customer data has become one of the most valuable assets that an organization can hold. So if we take Facebook, for instance, while it may appear that to users that they've got this free platform where we could go and post our photos and connect with people we used to know at school, in reality, the user data is actually what's being leveraged for targeted advertising. That's no secret. But we've seen issues and instances of data misuse in political campaigns. And to bring in another settlement example, based on Natasha's point before, Google had a $93 million settlement for misleading consumers about location tracking, and Twitter recently was fined 150 million, or X as it's known today, for handling users' contact details and handing them over to actual advertisers for them to contact them directly, which is terrible. So transparency is a word that's popped up a few times so far in data usage, is becoming increasingly critical. So how can organizations balance the demand for instant, personalized experiences with actually safeguarding customer data to ensure regulatory compliance? And as Natasha seems to be our guru on legal cases, I'm going to start with you.
Right. So I think we should go back a step, because all the things that everyone's kind of been talking about today is related to data. And actually, we then need to think about the question, like, how is data regulated in different countries, different regions around the world? I always think it's really interesting when people talk about Facebook or Twitter, because these companies, they're American, and in America, everything's for sale. Like, you sign up to things knowing that your data is for sale. Like, the only state in America that has any sort of data law is California. And I think there are maybe 3 or 4 other states that are following this year with their data law. So essentially, you're operating from a baseline where everything is for sale. There's never been more of a case to read your T's and C's when you sign up to companies in the US. The second thing is that in the EU, which we're not part of anymore, I had to share it. I had to put it in. They recently, on the 13th of March, they approved an AI Intelligence Act. And this is groundbreaking, because a lot of organizations work in the UK and in the EU, as well as, in other countries. And they've actually specified in that act that you need to have the risk assessment. You need to have use logs for that AI tool. You need to be transparent and accurate. I'm reading my notes. You need to ensure human oversight. So the human oversight bit is really interesting and echoes the comments in the chat. And a lot of companies, so I mentioned Clifford Chance earlier, they've used AI tools internally to manage manual tasks, which is in the chat. But anything related to their customers, they've actually they've actually got a lawyer to validate anything that happens, right? So it's an extra layer. You've got to evaluate the models. You need to think about detailed summaries of the training data. So it's not about, so to your point, Claire, it's not about, oh, let's just chuck everything into the model and let's see what it spits out. Now it's about, you're going to need to record that data that goes into that model, because we need to sense check that. And then the final one is reporting on incidents. Like if there is an AI, and which is essentially a data, let's not forget AI is our data related incident, you need to report on that. So we actually have, exactly, Maria, I'm sorry, I've pronounced your name wrong, but that is exactly another point. Like humans, the jobs are there and the laws are starting to come into force. And I just checked on the news today. So I don't know if anyone was following the SAG-AFTRA strikes in the US, because it didn't really affect the UK. But one of the Actors Guild strike that happened over most of the summer. So one of the key aspects of that was that they were protesting their digital duplicates. So they didn't want to lose the rights to having their likeness being portrayed. So Netflix is a prime candidate for this. There's a whole episode of Black Mirror about this. And they've actually literally, I think, what do my notes say? Literally on the 9th of April, they went to a court in Sacramento to put in an act to fine tune the law around how their digital likeness can be used. So the point I'm saying is that we are making moves because people understand. And I think we're making moves on this probably faster than trying to get seatbelts in cars, because that didn't happen until the 1970s. So I think we're making better progress than we think.
So I'm afraid we're going to have to move us on because that little delay took a time. But I was like, you are definitely a font of knowledge. I would really recommend you write an article about this. I think we'd love to see more of those examples in practice. To share more. So Agnes, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think transparency, brand values, all that sort of stuff is quite important when considering, I guess I'm thinking about it from like a contact center / actual customer experience team perspective. And I think a good example of that is we have really specific requirements at HotDoc, which is that we actually really need our vendors to be, in most cases, SOC 2 certified, and that depends on the application, but also we have a requirement for our data to be housed on shore. So any data that we send to vendors can't be stored elsewhere outside of Australia. So at the end of the day, when we consider even tools validation, I think someone was talking about that before, being one of the sort of key areas that you need to start with. When we consider tools validation, we have to make sure that we're ticking those two boxes at a minimum. And then secondly, at the end of the day, all of our tickets, they have personally identifiable information in them. And we do not want that information outside of our gates unless it's absolutely necessary. And there are some other healthcare companies that accept that their data can be put elsewhere and outside of Australia, but we don't accept that. Like, that is a value that we have, and it goes against our current promises for our customers. So we intentionally will never feed tickets that contain any PII into our model. And we know that by doing that, we also greatly reduce the potential of what AI can actually do for us. But, we can't get the same efficiency on every ticket, right? But the risk is just too high. And at the end of the day, we are more on that extreme side of risk adversity. But if it kind of means that I can log off at night and know I'm not actively putting anyone in harm's way with the data that they choose to share with my support team for the sake of saving a few bucks on ticket deflection, then that's absolutely worthwhile. But I think the more interesting part is in the healthcare industry. So right now, there's a real swell of activity specifically around GPs using transcription tools, and that's really in order for them to be able to spend more time actively with the patient. And I think that's such a great value proposition, to have your undivided attention from the doctor. But at the same time, you as a patient are also accepting that you might be feeding a model with your really personal health information. And what we're seeing also in Australia is that GPs are just kind of forging their own way because we actually don't have any regulations or rules in place yet for AI. In fact, I was reading even today about an article. There was a telehealth doctor that's using AI to power a diagnosis form that they're using to prescribe medicine, specifically vape medicine. So, and that is just bonkers to me because, how can you feel like you can give the right prescription by feeding, an AI form? And that also goes against regulations here in Australia, specifically for prescriptions and specifically around telehealth prescriptions. Wow. So I think for doctors, for them to keep it safe, they're going to choose a tool that's well vetted by maybe some of the technology that they're already using. But also I'm seeing some of the doctors creating their own tools as well. And that's because if they create their own tools, they can actually gate that information really heavily. And that's how they ensure compliance at first. But the hygiene, after all, is probably the T word that everyone has mentioned here, which is transparency. And I think when you're going to use these types of tools at the very beginning of an appointment, you should always ask for consent. You should always say, this is the tool I'm using. Is this okay? You should always have opt-out options for the patient or for the customer if they do not want to be part of that particular journey. And also we're finding that as long as there's value in the process, then people are more likely to feel like it's something they can accept. So if a patient can, for example, have a copy of the notes after the appointment, they feel like they're getting value from the tool themselves, and they're more likely to be okay with sharing their data as well. We actually validated that with a recent patient focus group as well. So yeah, there's a lot of like interesting parts to it. I think transparency is key, consent is key, but also really going back to your values as a company and what you're willing to accept by way of risk.
I'm really getting a sense that it is like at the starting point of thinking about this stuff that's so critical, isn't it, rather than in the delivery of it. And yeah, that's really resonating. I'm like super conscious of time. We've got about 20 minutes left.
Am I allowed to add to Agnes's comments about healthcare super quickly? Super quick, yeah. So two things. One, there is a company in the UK called AccuX that does exactly what Agnes is talking about, where they actually they were used heavily during the pandemic to do the doctor to patient communications, because they needed a platform to do the virtual chat because the NHS didn't provide for that, and they've just massively bloomed. Like it's they're the money that they've raised for their company, and I think they're expanding to the US, so that's a field ripe for development. And the second thing, no explanations, just go and Google Babylon and what happened to Babylon. That's all I'll say. Thanks,
Awesome. Thank you, Natasha, for that addition. So I think Sandra, Emily, is there anything for you to add about how maybe customers can maintain trust and build trust in a time where data breaches and data misuse is becoming so common?
I think so, Sandra. If you don't mind, I'll jump in first and keep me true, of course, leading from the brain. As has been mentioned in all the comments and throughout this, transparency is really key. And it's always really difficult to balance out that sort of privacy, personalization, efficiency, risk paradox. So how much do we do? How much do we share? How much do we use? Where do we store it? And I think that transparency upfront about what's being collected, where it's being stored, is it anonymized? Is it not? And can I access and can I see it freely and readily whenever I want to, are some of those foundational elements of that trust. But also, using things like privacy enhancing technologies, so PETs or PETs as some people are calling them, so that we can securely manage that data and making sure people are aware of what measures, businesses have in place to manage their personal data. I do really think it comes down to understanding what's going to be done with it. Like, what do you do with what I tell you and what I share with you? And can I see how you use it? And to the point earlier about, seeing our own records from doctors, I'd love to know what's been written about me. I'd love to know. Like, I get a prescription out the end, that's fine. But, just out of curiosity, I'd love to know.
Yeah, no, I love that. So just moving us on then to our final section now, which is next gen and immersive experiences, where we're going to be talking about the hype that's happening around this. So I don't know if anyone remembers, I'm sure you all do, but like a couple of years ago, it was all about the metaverse, and that was going to revolutionize customer experience. Like, we were all going to be wearing these headsets and virtually shopping in our own homes by now, but that hasn't quite happened. It's fell rather short from the expectation. So now the focus on next gen is more about meeting customer expectations for round-the-clock availability, for instant solutions, and flexibility. So AI and particularly conversational commerce are emerging as these next big trends, but are they another metaverse and likely to be a letdown? So this final section, we're going to have to keep it punchy because we've only got a short time left. And audience, it's time to get your questions ready. What would you like to ask the panel? If you haven't already, please do get those questions into the chat. So as conversational commerce is emerging as a key trend. Natasha, just so everyone's on the same page, can you just explain what it is and how it shapes the customer journey briefly?
Yeah, of course. So I was quite new to the phrasing, but I think it's essentially how we use basically conversational technology. So chatbots, a bot, anything like that, to help users, customers to basically do purchases, decision making, and it's basically through that specific channel. Is that about right? Like, I had to look around for that to get such a succinct explanation.
No, that's cool. And Sandra, I'm going to bring you back in now to share. How do you think businesses can capitalize on the trend of live stream shopping?
I think there are three things. The first thing is significance. So I'm going to be shopping for something and someone's having a conversation with me to reassure me. I've got questions. So it's all the whole thing about, well, I wonder if it'll arrive on time and can I get it in another color? It's speeding up because I don't have to go and search for it because someone's going to tell me and they're chatting away. So I'm building my trust because I've got a human, apparently, who is telling me all of this information. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the building up of getting to know me. So I imagine that over time, all of that stuff will be built up. So the next time I go on and I'm looking for something, oh, you already bought that. Oh, we've got a new thing here. So it's speeding things up, it's adding value. We are constantly concerned that it might not deliver to our expectations. Having someone tell us it's going to be fine, and by the way, we've got these other things going on, I think will make us feel trust faster, buy more, but it's absolutely the responsibility of the organization not to be divisive, to make sure I don't spend more than I've got.
Thank you. And I think finally, to finish us off for this session before we go to our audience Q&A, I think Emily, I think you've probably got some good examples here of how conversational commerce has been implemented successfully, or maybe one where it hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all experienced the circle of doom in a terrible conversational experience. And when I think about conversational experiences, they need to be seamless, meaningful, complete, valuable, and personalized. For me, that's what categorizes a true, seamless experience, conversation experience. There's an example, which is not Zendesk specific, but around, I think it's in the Netherlands, I want to say, and I could get this wrong, so call me out on it if it is. Using chatbots to accompany elderly. Would it be better if they had people running around them, loving them, holding their hands and having conversations 24/7? Absolutely. We all need humans in our lives. But a seamless conversational experience that has allowed people to help out and have those moments of companionship has landed fairly well in certain areas there. But in the commercial side of things, having that seamless conversation experience, we've seen Four Seasons deliver some wonderful stuff. Now let's go kind of high-end luxury for a moment. Let's imagine we're in our infinity pool. Champagne's run out. Oh no. Apple juice, whatever's your flavor. Instead of getting out, dripping across your deck, dripping across your bedroom to the phone to call room service or pressing a button, you can use an app to seamlessly request what you need. You don't have to get up to answer your door. You don't have to let them in. You can reorder what you've already chosen before. And you just simply, through your phone, request the service you need. Someone comes in, delivers and leaves. Yes, it's a luxury experience, but it is entirely seamless.
Amazing. And I do like the idea of that. I definitely would have champagne in my infinity pool, not apple juice.
Is it full of champagne?
Absolutely full of champagne, and champagne on the sides. But that's the kind of future vision I'm interested in. So does anyone have anything to add just to the end? Because we're getting ready to ask questions from the audience now. No, so we definitely covered a hell of a lot. We covered, I think, really importantly, that this is an ethical conversation, isn't it? That companies have to put at the start of thinking about this, or go back to the start of thinking about this, about their intentions behind what are we using AI for, how they can effectively create the guardrails through their vision, their values, their principles around how they implement AI to ensure that inclusion is put front and center of their conversation, and that we don't worsen problems that already exist, that we continue to, I suppose, see regulation as a friend in this, that actually those guardrails are critical that are being put in externally, apart from when it comes to data in America, according to Natasha, that enable us to have some legislation and legal precedent around governance for how this proceeds into the future. And that, yeah, like there is so much more potential technology being released all the time that could have the most incredible impact on human experiences, but unless we really are focused, to Sandra's point, on who these humans are that we're trying to serve, what's important to them, how do they need to be served, how do we prioritize those use cases and start to experiment rather than just overnight deploy these kinds of technologies, is going to be critical to the conversation going forward. So with that in mind, Bhumika K has a question, and that is, after AI, what is the next revolution that we're going to be experiencing in CX? Does anyone have an idea of what that might be? Go on, Agnes.
I have maybe a controversial opinion, which is
I love those.
I believe we're always cyclical. So if we delve really deeply in AI, my prediction is we'll come out the other side craving human experience or human interaction. And I think we saw that even with COVID, when you considered the online experience prior to COVID, and then obviously online shopping being the only thing we could really do in COVID, and having these deliveries. Afterwards, when all the lockdowns ended and we returned back to in-store experiences, people realized that they couldn't just have a normal retail experience. They had to have a reason why people go to a store, and that was to actually bring them forward. And they would do crazy things like, make sure that maybe there's a person playing a piano there, or maybe they'll serve drinks or whatever it might be. But there's always something to really bring them back and to give them that human experience that they wouldn't get online. So my prediction would be that the more we lean into AI, the more we'll come out the other end wanting something completely different.
No, I love that, and I echo that. And I think maybe that like human-led service will become a premium product again. Like as in, this is something that you want it, but people will be prepared, like a luxury version of service, to also invest more into it. That's my hypothesis. Anyone else? Any predictions? What's the next big CX revolution? As if this one wasn't big enough.
I'm wondering if communities of people are just going to create more startups out of the dissatisfaction of what they're getting from a customer experience. So I'm in a co-working space right now, and there are many industries, micro industries, because of dissatisfaction, where people just part-time, even volunteering to correct the course. So I wonder how empowerment and revolution might be, and people being able to just do stuff themselves without creating formal businesses.
Yeah, so opening up for more innovation. That's an interesting one. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think we'll move away from kind of economic good generated things, and we'll be moving more towards things that have a societal good. So we're living in a cost of living crisis, and I think we're going to move into a space where people are going to be more demanding of, how are you going to solve a housing crisis? How are you going to enable equal access to healthcare? Like, these are big issues. Like, we have an aging population. Like, I think these are the issues. Climate change, another one. Like, I think anything centered around customer experience, like we're already seeing with younger people, I'm not going to use the cliched phrase, we're already seeing a trend of younger people where they make decisions based on their values. Like, it started with millennials and that's carried through. So I think we're going to see more values driven, more societally kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's gone. But things that align with people's values more than things that give them status, I think. So yeah, of course, people are still going to watch things like Selling Sunset and Bling Empire, but we all watch those tongue in cheek, right? Like, a lot of us are now more focused on, okay, can I buy a house? Should I buy a house? How am I going to provide for my grandparents? That kind of thing. Do I want to bring my children into a world that is potentially on fire? I think these are the things that are going to determine where we go next as organizations.
Cool. Thanks, Natasha. And then Ruda's question, she shared that it's such an exciting time for us all in the industry, but also very worrying time for our people, which is true, isn't it? Everybody's, a year ago, that was the whole conversation, wasn't it? Agents will be erased by 2025. So Ruda's asking what your advice is on how we can bring our people on the journey with us so that they don't feel that fear of being out and out replaced. Emily, I'm going to pick on you first. What are your thoughts?
Sure. Goes back a bit to what Agnes was talking about earlier around transparency and education, making sure people understand what it is, what you're doing, and also what Sandra said, how you're intending to use it, the it being AI, right? Technology, bots, MLM, all of these things. But also educating people on the opportunities that are there. Like, can you create this? Can you build it? A little bit like, tech training for women in minority groups or areas where there isn't college available, making sure that there's available education and opportunity linked to this. And I do find myself wondering, tying a little bit back to the last question, is how much the human experience will drive a higher cost, a higher premium, a higher desire, and actually create better paid jobs in the service world. Because if you have bots doing the cheaper stuff, yes, I know we need to impact bottom line. Everyone looks at how much things cost. But perhaps we humans are seen with a little bit more value in the service we're providing, because now we're doing it in that humane way people are craving when they don't want that chat and digital experience.
Yeah, love that. Anyone else, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I've been putting my people to work. So they're the ones that are actually, honing the tools now. And a really good example of that is one of the tools that we're using. It kind of acts as a co-pilot for the agent, right? But we noticed that it wasn't generating very good responses because our knowledge base was just not great. It wasn't made for an AI bot to read it. It didn't have the right definitions for an AI bot to understand different parts of the language that we use, or even the tones that we have for our specific customer base. So now we're spinning up a program of work with our people and enabling them, because they have the most, subject matter expertise, to actually go back and redo our knowledge base and make that actually applicable for AI usage. Yeah.
I love that example, Agnes. Absolutely brilliant one. And we're going to have to close off soon. So any final comments? I think there are a couple more questions in the chat, and one's just a funny one, but I know that the answer to this is yes. One person did use Chat GTP to prepare for this session. Natasha, what did you ask Chat GTP?
Hello. So yes, I did ask ChatGPT. So I asked, what should I, as a woman of color, wear to a virtual panel on AI? So before I get into the funny part, there's two things here. There is a skill in asking any AI bot, especially one like this, good questions. And it is a critical thinking tool. And that is not taught in schools because people don't understand how to tell between what's right and what's wrong. And there's a whole misinformation piece around that. So that's my educational bit done. But I did ask, and I got a very nice response from the chatbot. And I'd like to say that I did add the women of color tag because that's always fun to add. And it told me to choose a bold and vibrant color, pair it with solid colored pants, which clearly it didn't pass the fact that I was on a virtual call because you can't see that I'm wearing joggers, right? Consider wearing statement jewelry. Yes, but I don't need advice to do that. And opt for colors that complement your skin tone and make you feel empowered. I went for black. And make sure your outfit is comfortable. And it told me, good luck with your virtual panel on AI. So all I'm going to say is AI semantically good? No. Do you need humans, to Agnes's point, to pass kind of human meaning and stuff aside from things that are semantically not quite right? Yes, but there we go. So I did.
So in one sentence, ladies, I'm just going to ask you for your key takeaway from this session. Sandra, what's yours?
Look strategically, don't just plug and play because that's an easy option. Don't be lazy. Do the thinking for the brain.
Love it. Agnes, your words of wisdom, final thought?
Sure. Yeah, just very much think about what values you hold, what risks you're willing to accept, and just start with low risk opportunities if you're concerned. I think, and or training your people, there's no risk there at all.
Super smart advice. Emily, your final thoughts?
Put the human being first. Think how it will impact the human experience. What are you trying to do for ourselves? What do we want to do for ourselves?
Love that. And Natasha, final word?
What's your data doing and what problem are you solving?
Love that. Fantastic. So I'd just like to say thank you so much. There were so many brilliant questions in the chat and we just didn't quite have time for all of them. But one final thank you, ladies. Round of applause. You are absolutely amazing. And thank you to Zendesk for helping us on our mission to challenge the status quo and ensure that women's voices are at the centre of important industry conversations on AI and technology like this. And of course, a huge thank you to everybody who joined us today. We wouldn't be a CX community without asking you for feedback, though. So we've just popped a link in the chat and it's just 4 questions. So please do let us know what you thought of today's panel so we can practice what we preach and ensure that your feedback is integrated into the ones that we do next time. So we have future WiCX Talk Trends debates coming up already. They're in the works. So please do make sure you're following us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter and be ready to hear the exciting news and updates that we've got coming down the line. So that's it. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Bye for now.